Hello, YouTube. Hello, scholars and educators of all backgrounds, but particularly those of you who are in high school, either in the United States or somewhere else around the world. Welcome one, welcome all, but a huge welcome, special welcome to my ninth grade students at the School of Arts and Enterprise. For those of you who don't know, my name is Angel Hernandez Romero. I'm better known online and on my socials as Scholargamernerd. I've tried to popularize a corny tag that goes something like this: scholar first, gamer second, nerd always. And the purpose of this video is to supplement the learning of my students as we transition into this online learning model, given our current crisis, the current pandemic around the world. So that's the primary objective, right? To supplement my students' learning. But a secondary objective, and this is the reason why I'm recording this video, is to allow this recording to have a life and replay value outside of a live stream. So that's the reason why I didn't do it as a live stream, because I know that many parents and families and young people out there are going to experience logistical challenges with access to internet, access to resources, so on and so on. So I want you to obviously do your best to finish this by the deadline, but I also want you to know that there is flexibility because this is a time of crisis. I mean, there's no other way to slice it and dice it. Whether you're a public school kid or a private school kid, I think all families are going to face different challenges, but I just want to make sure that all of the families that I serve, but also families around the world, educators around the world are aware of the fact that we don't have to only survive this crisis, we can thrive. We can still be intellectually inspired. We can still have our intellectual juices flowing. And that's really the objective of me sharing this with you today. So the idea is, once the video is finished recording, I would like for my students, of course, to participate in the comment box, ask questions, hopefully help each other out, ask me clarification questions. So one logistical point: if you're my student, you can email me directly at my work email. You all have it. If you are an educator or a scholar of some sort and you have follow-up questions, you can email me at scholargamernerd@gmail.com, and I'd be more than happy to, share any of my stuff with you. I don't mind. I'm not on teachers pay teachers or anything like that, so I'll just hook you up. Just ask me for it and I'll email it to you. All right. So currently, as my students know, we are completing our unit on Romeo and Juliet, and this is actually our day 2 lesson. And today we're analyzing specifically Act 1, Scenes 2 and 3. So quick logistical point. You'll notice that I'm facilitating my instruction, meaning my communication and uploading of documents and work submission, so on and so on, via Google Classroom. That was the agreed upon platform that my school site decided to go with. So that's what we're doing. And I have essentially like this 2-step system that I've implemented for students submitting their work. First, I upload the assignment, right? And I gave it this long title: Online Learning Day 2, Romeo and Juliet, Fire Right, Finish the Scenario. Okay? Now within this post, there are 3 attachments. We have the Romeo and Juliet full audiobook, which is free on YouTube. You can click right into it. Boom.
Romeo and Juliet.
Boom. Link works. We also have the text. Okay. This was shared by mit.edu, so I simply just linked that. So that means kids don't need the physical book, right? They have access to a digital text here online. And then the last thing, and the most important thing I would argue, is the actual literacy routine. So Google Classroom is cool in the sense that this entire document, right, this is essentially, this is what would ultimately be their packet or their worksheet, right? If this was an in-person educational context. This would be their packet. That's also attached to this link, and I've generated a copy for all students. That's an option that Google Classroom gives you. So I'm gonna go ahead and close that down. And then the second step, right? So let me read to you the steps, right? That was basically, I told you I have a 2-step system. So that was step 1. This entire thing that you see here, that entire post is step 1, right? That we're gonna think about as our literacy routine. That's what we're gonna call it, our literacy routine. We're building literacy upon a specific topic, right? In Romeo and Juliet. Then we have the second step rather. It's called Online Learning Day 2, Check for Understanding, the post-lesson reflection. I ask 3 simple questions, okay, regarding the content that they completed in step 1, and then I ask them to participate in academic dialogue, digital dialogue, many people call it different things, by responding constructively to one of your peers in 1 to 2 sentences, okay? So that's the quick check for understanding. That's how I know that students have completed their work. They're thinking critically about the different themes and concepts. And it also gives some insight into whether they did the reading or not, because you cannot really craft a cohesive response for number 3, for instance. How would you react if you were in Juliet's situation? What can we infer about Juliet's social emotional well-being? Think about the marriage arrangement plans. You can't really answer that unless you read the designated reading, okay? So given that information, let's actually get right into it. So let's look at step 1. So this is actually more for my students or anyone out there looking for lesson plan designs. So I created this template myself. This is a Google Docs file. And today's lesson is based on Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scenes 2 and 3. Now, in a typical classroom, the essential questions would be posted on my whiteboard, but in this case, we're in digital format, so I'm just posting it on the worksheet or the digital file. The reason why I'm posting it on here is because I often remind my students that these essential questions are the core guiding questions that are going to direct our thinking, right, towards a longer essay, a longer term paper, a summative assessment. So allow me to read the 3 essential questions for this unit. Number 1, in literature and real life, to what extent are humans controlled by both fate and free will? What role do passion and family values play with regard to our social emotional development? That's a big question, right? That's not a question that you can answer in 5 minutes, and that's actually the focus question of today. Now we have 2 other secondary essential questions, but we're not going to cover those today. I just have them on there for the purposes of thinking long term, right? Backwards design. The idea for this unit is to be able to answer any of these 3 questions efficiently, cohesively, and with confidence, right? So I'm explicit about telling the students, do not answer question yet, because these are essentially longer essay questions that will complete at a later point, right? This is a 6 to 8 week unit, so we're not answering these yet, right? Right now we're building literacy, constructing the different working pieces of what will essentially become a longer work, okay? Lesson begins here. I have my lesson objective and my do now, right? Every lesson that I teach has an objective and has a do now. Why? Because we need to know where we're going and we need to activate prior knowledge. So I'm also intentional about teaching the students the depth of knowledge that the work entails. The reason why that's important is because students need to know the level of rigor of the work they are producing, right? And that's based on the DOK wheel, right? That most of you guys, if you're educators, you should be familiar with, right? The depth of knowledge levels, right? Sometimes we have our students inferring, but we think they're synthesizing, right? To synthesize information and to infer information is not the same thing. And I think it's critical that whether we're teaching, at a high achieving private school or a middle tier public school or a struggling public school, whatever, wherever you're teaching, doesn't matter. The UK, the US, Canada, El Salvador, it doesn't matter. Like, we need to be very honest and clear with our students about the depth of knowledge that they're engaging, at least to the best of our ability. So every single chunk in my lesson has a depth of knowledge. And again, I'm not a master pedagogue. Some of this stuff might be better delivered, arranged differently, and I'm okay with that. This is my 4th year in the classroom, so I'm still developing as an educator. Okay. All right. So the objective for today's lesson is scholars will analyze the notion of parental pressures as articulated in Romeo and Juliet by considering the figurative language used in Act 1, Scenes 2 and 3, in order to craft their own creative narrative in response to parental pressures and or teenage drama. Now, that's a lot, right? That is a lot of information. Basically, we're going to look at the ways in which Juliet is being pressured into an arranged marriage, but we're going to think about that through the lens of figurative language, right? Some text-dependent questions, and more importantly, through my students' own perspective on the issue, on the topic. Okay? Now let's go into the do now. Instructions. Answer the following question in 2 to 3 sentences. Question. What comes to mind when you see the words parental pressures? Come up with at least one common example of parental pressure, okay, or of a parental pressure, okay? Now, students might, Students might say a variety of things here, and the idea is for this should only take like 5 minutes. Like, students shouldn't spend half an hour trying to answer this question, okay? 5 minutes, boom, quit. 3 to 5 minutes, right? Give me your 2 to 3 sentences. You know, in a typical classroom, we do a whole group share out, maybe have 2 or 3 kids share, boom, on to the next one. Pretty straightforward. All right, and the DOK level for that was level 1 and 2, because I'm asking students to identify a parental pressure. That's a level 1. And I'm asking them to come up, right, which would be an inference with at least one common example, right? Okay, now let's go ahead and look at DOK level 3. Now I'm asking students to cite evidence. Okay, that's DOK level 3 on the DOK wheel. This requires students to answer short response questions. The instructions are: read Act 1, Scene 1, and answer the questions that follow. Cite textual evidence to support your point. 3 to 4 sentences. In this case, I've incorporated the hyperlink to Act 1, Scene 2, right? So students literally can just click on it and wait, what? Yeah, just click and it takes them right to Scene 2. They would have to read it. And the cool thing is that, let's just say that I don't feel like reading for whatever reason, even though I highly encourage that you read it, but let's just say you don't feel like reading it. Okay, no biggie. You don't feel like reading it, you can just click on the audiobook.
Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. This is a LibriVox recording.
And just work your way up to that section. It's that simple. Okay? So that's that. Let's look at question number 1. Who is Capulet's pick for Juliet's husband, and why is this detail critical to the plot? So obviously you would get that response by reading Act 1, Scene 2. Then we have the second question: what do we learn about Peter's education? How does his education impact his social standing? Here's another short response question, right? Just 3 to 4 sentences, just getting students to think, right, about how those in power, right, are relating to their workers, in essence, right? Like the relationship between the characters, right, between the main characters and secondary characters, right? Because those nuances really matter, right? All right, now let's go into Act 1, Scene 3, short response questions. And the instructions are pretty much the same. I ask students read Act 1, Scene 3, and answer the questions that follow. Again, they can click on the hyperlink and it'll take them straight to Scene 3. Okay? Enter Lady Capulet and Nurse. All right, the question 1 is, how does Lady Capulet's conversation with Juliet regarding marriage unfold? I'm asking them to explore, like, how is she presenting, like, her proposal, right, her ideas to Juliet, Lady Capulet, that is. And question number 2 is, how does this scene continue to develop upon the theme of parental influence? Okay, so those are very critical questions, right? Okay, so we have Capulet in scene 2 and Lady Capulet in scene 3, right? Father and mother, right? Trying to influence daughter to make a pretty big decision. All right. Then we have the figurative language questions, right? And this is where more of that literary component, right? The literary analysis piece to literature and composition class comes into play. So this is actually a combination of DOK 1 and DOK 3. So I ask students to identify, that's level 1, and to cite evidence, that would be level 3. Now again, I've hyperlinked Acts 2 and 3, and the instructions are: review Act 1, Scenes 2 and 3, and answer the questions that follow in 3 to 4 complete sentences. All right, so question 1 is, identify and explain the figurative language used in Capulet's speech to Paris. I tell them where that could be found. And I know that these are more difficult to write because you have to insert evidence. And oftentimes students struggle in properly inserting textual evidence. So what I did for this one is I provided a sample response. So the sample response states, during his conversation with Paris, Capulet uses figurative language to express genuine enthusiasm and calculated concern about Juliet marrying Paris. Right? You notice I'm using those specific adjectives, right? In a state of apprehension, Capulet states, let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride. End quote. Personifying summers as prideful time cycles and his daughter's need to mature, Capulet makes it clear that he feels Juliet is too young to marry at 13. Okay? That's it. You don't need to get into like, this is true because 13 is a young age and all this other stuff, right? I'm not asking you to analyze just yet. I'm just asking you to identify it and explain it. Okay? So that response would suffice. Then we have number 2, explain the metaphors Benvolio uses in Act 1, Scene 2. Why is this choice of words especially odd? Okay, so you're going to do that one on your own. Then we have number 3, explain the hyperbole Romeo articulates in Act 1, Scene 2. What is his choice of comparisons reveal about his character? Okay, again, you're going to have to revisit that scene. Question number 4, discuss the metaphors used by Lady Capulet in Act 1, Scene 3. What does this reveal about her? Again, you're going to have to go back to Scene 3. So these are just simply text-dependent questions based on figurative language used in the play. Okay? And the reality is that I'm sure many of these questions, like, students are going to try to Google them or, try to do a quick search on, I don't know, SparkNotes or something like that. So I will say that as an educator, as your teacher, as a teacher, I try to limit the amount of like just these these text dependent questions because they can be easy to answer sometimes. Okay, cool. So now that we've delved into some reading and analyzing and writing, I usually have the students watch a video to build their critical understanding of the format, in this case, the play, right? The tragic play, tragedy, right? And I therefore assigned a video reflection, right? And the video reflection is a crash course video based on Aristotle's Poetics, okay? So the instructions are, and this is DOK2, this is simply summarization and observations. Okay, so students are summarizing information as they observe it. Okay. So this is the link again. They watch the video first and it should open.
Somehow I got here by searching for help with my accounting assignment.
We made USAA insurance for veterans like Martin. When a hailstorm...
All right, so
hey there, I'm Mike Rignetta. This is Crash Course Theater, and today is going to be a tragedy. A Greek tragedy, which is a lot like a regular...
Anyways, so for those of you who are scholars in the field of English, you know that Shakespearean work in many ways was inspired by Greek tragedy. And so this is important to consider, right? So what I did was I gave students, right, some context, right? Like there is a history to this work, right? So I had them look at Aristotle's Poetics just to build more literacy and understanding about it, so that they don't view Shakespeare's work as this like wrinkle in time, as this like, you know, this bubble, this suspended animated moment of literary genius that simply happened to live beyond its time. Like, no, this has a timeline, this has a trajectory, right? An intellectual trajectory. And so I think it's important for students to have that in their intellectual arsenal, right? To be able to articulate that they understand the origins of Shakespearean work or at least influences of the origins of Shakespearean work, so on and so on. So all I did was I watched the video on Crash Course, which obviously Crash Course is an incredible resource, if you did not know, right? One of the best educational online video platforms out there. Yeah, so I simply just watched the video and I came up with short response questions, like literally like summary based questions. So question number 1 is straightforward. What is the Poetics? And then I gave the sample response so that students know that these are like simple responses. Give me 1 to 2 sentences, move on. So the sample response states, Aristotle's Poetics is the earliest surviving work of dramatic theory. Straight to the point. Question number 2. What was the original objective or purpose of the Poetics? They're going to have to watch the video. The speaker's going to tell them that answer. Question 3. How does Aristotle define a tragedy? Come up with a concise definition in your own words. See, now this one requires a little bit of thinking. So the DOK wheel might actually need to be updated for that one. That might be a level, let's see, distinguish, interpret. Okay, no, that's still level 2. That's like, okay, interpret, categorize, identify, summarize, make observations, compare, investigate, cite evidence, hypothesize, formulate. Well, that's not really formulating anything though. But anyways, the reason why I framed this question in this specific way is because the video gives you a very specific definition that they're quoting, but I don't want students to quote. I want them to come up with their own definitions, right? That's the thinking part, right? You need to dig into your own lexicon, right? Into your own intellectual arsenal, right? Do you know a more concise or perhaps cohesive way of defining this, right? Can you explain it to others, right? That's the true measure for learning, if you can explain that concept to others in a clear and concise way. Question 4 is, what is the purpose of catharsis? Again, the video will define that. Question 5, according to Aristotle, what 3 main elements should tragic plots incorporate? That's a very easy answer. Question 6, what connections are there between Greek tragedy and Shakespeare's work? Think Romeo and Juliet. And the reason I put that in parentheses is because I need to be consciously aware of the fact that some of my students may have not read Romeo and Juliet before, and that's okay. We're scholars. We're building literacy around Shakespeare's work, specifically Romeo and Juliet. Cool? So that's pretty straightforward. That should take students no more than maybe 20-25 minutes, I imagine, depending on how fast they're able to extrapolate the information. So now let's move on to the fire rites. So the fire rites are opportunities for students to engage in creative writing. And so in a typical classroom setting, I usually give students like 12 to 15 minutes to complete this assignment. but in this case, obviously, they'll have as much time as they need. And, at this point, right, we've completed the do now. Okay. We've reviewed the objective. Students have answered short response questions based on textual evidence. Students have analyzed figurative language, and they've reviewed Aristotle's Poetics and that historical trajectory of the tragedy, right? The Greek tragedy and the Shakespearean tragedy. So now they get to create their own scenario. So this is actually a lesson plan that I've adapted from one of my colleagues over at Green Dot. His name's Noé Armendariz. Great dude. Gave me some really solid resources, and this is a writing prompt that I picked up from his work. So if you're watching this, shout out to you, bro. Thank you. I made some slight changes to it, but anyways, this is the prompt. Okay, in Veronese society, one's family influence was often a tool of fate. For this fire rite, you are to choose one of the following scenarios and write a 150 to 200. You know what? I should have made that 2 to 300. I just realized that. That's just a note to self. A 2 to 300 word response in the form of a logical argument. Pretend you are there, either witnessing or experiencing the drama, and decide what happens next. Okay? So if you notice, this is very open-ended, but I'm still highlighting, right, the importance of family influence, right? I'm using these keywords such as fate, right? And I'm having them create their own scenario, okay? They're developing a logical argument. Okay, so it's open-ended, but then it's going to get specific as to the scenario, right? Scenario number 1. An older father is hoping that his daughter will soon find love and get married. He decides to set her up with an attractive young man from a well-known family in hopes that maybe this could be the one. What happens next? Why? Maybe I'll delete the why. Just what happens next, right? Adolescents, teens are very creative, right? In their analysis of romance, right? Of friendships, of family conflict, and so on. So the idea here is for them to come up with a scenario and decide its outcome, right? Again, thinking about those major themes of fate, free will, what's going to happen, right? Is the daughter going to get married? Is the daughter going to reveal something we didn't know to the father? Is the daughter going to follow suit? Is the daughter going to rebel? Right? I think these are critical questions that we can explore and come to an understanding of maybe different perspectives, common perspectives. We don't know. But I think this is the power of literature, right? It allows us to explore those big ideas, right? Those big problems that we oftentimes have to face. And then scenario number 2 is your friend shares with you a terrible plan. See, that's a powerful statement because a terrible plan may look different for everyone, right? And so you get to really explore a young person's psychology, right? At the moment, based on what they say here, which is why I love teaching English, because you really get to explore, right, dispositions, philosophical stances, ideologies, values, perspectives, ideas, concepts. You might be introduced to an idea that you didn't know. And so I think that's the power, right, in these creative writing assignments. Your friend shares with you a terrible plan. They become overrun by fear, they being your friend, and start acting erratic. Decide what this plan is and come up with a piece of sound advice you would give. Sorry guys, little typo there. You would give this friend, and why? A piece of... Why is it not allowing me to use sound advice? A piece of... I'll say mature advice, I guess. How do you think most people would react to this plan? Question mark. So again, right? You get to explore a student's mindset, disposition, and obviously you also get to gauge their ability to develop a cohesive argument, right? To clearly manage and implement the mechanics of conventional academic English. Okay? So there's a lot that you can do with this assignment. This is kind of like a bare bones. Once they complete that, then we have the exit ticket. Okay? The exit ticket is pretty much a final reflection in my classroom, and then I'm assuming in most classrooms. And in this case, the exit ticket is a level 3. I ask students to answer the following question in 2 to 3 cohesive sentences. The question is, what major challenge does Juliet currently face? Refer back to Act 1, Scene 3, and then they would just turn this in. Okay, they would just click turn in. They would have a turn in button at the upper right, I believe, or on the right side of their screen, their student screen. So once students finish this, then they can go on to the step 2 element of Romeo and Juliet, which is right here, the check for understanding, post-lesson reflection, right? They're going to answer the following questions in 3 to 4 sentences. What are some positive outcomes of parental pressures? Number 1. What are some negative outcomes of parental pressures, right? I think it's important to show both, right? In reading, writing, discussing, in knowledge production, in education, and in the real world, I think one could argue it's beneficial to have multiple perspectives on the same topic so that you come to a greater understanding, right? That's how we develop as thinkers, as human beings, right? You want multiple perspectives, right? I could have easily kept that, what are some negative outcomes of parental pressures, but then that would literally manipulate the conversation into a negative direction, right? And into this sort of grim, conflicted, challenging, problematic relationality between kids and their parents. And while I recognize that's a reality, I think it's also important to show the positives, right? As educators, we have to remember that the young people in our classrooms, right, come from diverse families, right? Whether it's socially, culturally, economically, philosophically, right? Religiously. I mean, you have a plethora of personalities and values and different worldviews, if you will. So for me, it's important not to just like hyperimpose like one perspective. It's just critical to have students sort of co-generate their understanding with their family, right? With the teacher, with their peers, right? Their social group, like very inquiry based. That's just my take on it. And then question number 3 is, how would you react if you were in Juliet's situation? What can we infer about Juliet's social emotional well-being? Think about the marriage arrangement plans. Again, right? Even though Verona, Italy, right, in the 1400s was a much different time period than 2020 pandemic America, pandemic Earth, we can still see that this young girl was experiencing some type of social and emotional stress, right? And I don't want to speak too much on that because I want my students to come up with their own conclusions, with their own ideas, but these questions allow scholars to make connections between the text and real life, and that's how you win them over. That's how you go from like all heads down to like, I want to talk about teenage drama. I want to talk about parental pressures. I've dealt with these things before. My family and I are currently discussing this idea, right? And that's how you build interest in a specific topic or in a work that you might otherwise perceive as boring, right? Now that's step 1. Now step 2, this is very critical. And if you're one of my students watching, if you're one of my 9th grade students, no matter what block you're in, it is very, very critical that you pay attention to this. I want all of my students, 100% of my students, to participate in academic dialogue, okay? By responding constructively, Okay, constructively. I don't want you to take away from the conversation. Obviously, unless there's an egregious misinterpretation of the text, right? Then you can sort of respectfully, correct the person. That's okay. I want you to participate in an academic dialogue by responding constructively to one of your peers in 1 to 2 sentences. Right? You just build on what they said, right? You analyze their opinion, and you confirm, you disconfirm, you corroborate, you build upon their argument, right? The idea is that we're making this a back and forth, right? A back and forth exchange, a dialogue, right? A dialectical exchange of knowledge, information, and ideas around Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scenes 2 and 3. Wow, I'm out of breath. I took no pauses there. That took about 35 minutes. This video will be uploaded to YouTube and possibly other platforms. Once again, if you did not get it in the beginning, I'll repeat it again. I'm Angel Hernandez Romero, okay? I'm an English teacher at the School of Arts and Enterprise in Southern California. I'm currently covering Romeo and Juliet. This is specifically to support my students in building their literacy around this unit and to help them support each other in the comment box below. Right, if you're one of my students and you have questions, like specific clarification questions, you can email me directly at my email, my work email. But if you're someone around the US, around the world, if you're a fellow educator, a fellow virtual colleague in these very strange, challenging, unprecedented, trying times, do not stress. We are here for you. We're here for each other. I really want us to use this opportunity to thrive, to figure out ways to make this transition to like self-quarantine and social distancing like a non-oppressive, like non-suffering thing. Like I know we're creative enough to thrive and survive. And in fact, I want to give a shout out to one of our parents at the SAY who use it, actually that specific language. We are creative, we can be interactive, we can figure this out. I urge and implore everyone, guys, I posted this on Instagram the other day, whether you're a parent or a kid or one of my friends, one of my colleagues, I urge and encourage everyone to, let's see, what did I say? I said, here it is. I urge my friends and family to stay informed, practice empathy, and embody your best self as we all face what's to come. I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't nervous about the possibility of this thing becoming an extreme crisis. But at the same time, I'm also an educator, and I know that many of my students and, my younger sister, my wife and friends are looking to me oftentimes for answers and ideas, and I don't have all the answers, guys. I don't have all the answers. I'm not the ultimate teacher, all right? I don't make the ultimate lessons, but what I do know is that as a human race, we're creative enough, we're empathetic enough, we're kind enough, we're intelligent and rational enough to not lose our marbles during this crazy transition. I know that to be a fact, okay? So with that being said, I want to remind you that we will prevail. We're going to stay strong. We're going to stay healthy, okay? We're going to do some indoor workouts. Prioritize your health. Check the updates. Read the data, okay? Stay informed. Contribute to the solution, right? Be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And besides that, guys, we're going to be fine. We're going to be okay. Be smart, obviously. Don't be complacent. Be proactive. And I believe we will thrive and we will survive. Again, whether you're a member of the School of Arts and Enterprise, right? Or you're a member of the human race, right? You're part of my family, right? This is for every educator, every scholar out there who wants to stay on top of their education. I hope you all found this useful. Feel free to ask questions in the comment box below. I'll answer them as soon as I get a chance. And that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to be a scholar first, gamer second, and a nerd always. Take care, everyone.